It is WKRK in Murphy, North Carolina, 105.5 FM, 1320 AM, cable TV channel 25, worldwide at country.am. We hope you're having a great day, and today is the very last Friday of the year.
Of the year 2016. I cannot believe that it's getting ready to be 2017. I was thinking just this morning, I can remember as a child when I was at my grandmother's house laying there with my feet propped up on the bar and thinking about how old I would be when year 2000 rolled around and wonder where I'd be and what's going on and all that. Now it's 17 years past that. It's hard to believe.
I've mentioned a time or two on the radio. I remember about Y2K and worrying about the computers stopping working at the because computers run this operation. And I was at this was when the studio was across from Walmart, and I was there. And our automation system was a DOS-based system, and luckily that month I had done an update on it, so it would count past 1999 without thinking it was 1900 again.
Yeah,
we only had like 2 computers that needed some changes, but yeah,
But the world didn't stop turning.
It did not stop, and I don't recall any planes falling out of the sky either that night.
Yeah,
but yeah, 17 years ago since Y2K.
Right, it's hard to believe, isn't it?
Time's flying by.
Time gets away from us. It sure does.
How's the sheriff on this fine Friday?
We're doing well. I know there's a lot of sickness going around, a lot of people out there that's kind of under the weather, and there's been several times I thought I might be getting sick and coming down with it, but have kind of escaped it up to this point. I've done a lot of hand washing, a lot of Germ-X, a lot of wiping Clorox around door handles, that kind of thing, trying to keep from catching something. But I did get my flu shot this year.
All right.
I went to the health department, got my flu shot, and so I think that's helped some. And I've never been a real fan of getting my flu shot, but as time gets away from us, we've got to realize we're not as young as we used to be.
And you're around a lot of people.
Around a lot of people, shake a lot of hands, And so it's. I thought it might be best just go ahead and get it this year and be done with it.
In the detention center, do you ever have problems with widespread illness? I know I've seen shows on TV where, with especially overcrowding situations, where things can.
Typically at the sheriff's office, there has been in history of the sheriff's office problems with that. We've not experienced anything in the last couple of years. Anytime they have like a flu outbreak and those type of things, and as soon as someone starts showing signs of showing any type of sickness or any kind of contagious disease that they may have, they're isolated in medical bay where no one's around them. And so we're pretty successful in trying to keep that out of the detention center and keep it from spreading. Medical staff stays on top of that pretty tight. So if anybody's got the sniffles or anything like that, a lot of times we move them out into medical bay just for precautionary measures, just to make sure they're not contagious or anything.
I've watched a documentary about some of the world's toughest prisons, and one of the ones it was last night I think I saw which people here should be grateful, but there was like one cell that had 24 beds in it, but 170 people in the cell. Yeah, which seems.
Well, see that's like with the county jail. A lot of people don't realize that they're designed for most of our cells. They're different kinds of cells, but most of the cells are designed for 4 people. But by state guidelines, they will let you put as many as 6 in there. You can put mattresses on the floor, and people sleep on the floor on mattresses. They can't sleep on the concrete, but they can sleep. If you put mattress in the floor, they can sleep on the floor. And we've only been to that point one time since I've been sheriff. As far as having overcrowding issues, that lasted about 3 days, and then it was back to normal routine. Sometimes when you have superior courts and you have a lot of different courts going on and people are getting sentenced, sometimes you run into those temporary things where there's a lot of people in there. But most of the time, that's not that situation. We can house up to 150 people, and most time we stay around 100. Most time it's below 100, but sometimes it gets up to 110, 115, and so we're nowhere near the overcrowded mark.
If you're under population, are they spread out among the cells, or
we try to give them as much room as we can if we're underpopulated. Of course, you don't want to spread them out so far that the detention officers are having to work twice as hard to keep track of everybody. But we do try to maybe like put 2 to a cell or something like that, just to give them a little extra room, in there to move around. So it just depends on how many people you have, how long they're going to be there, that type of thing. And once they get in, they get their commissary in, they get their beds, they get all that kind of stuff, their clothes, and kind of get used to sale. Typically, they don't like to be moved around a lot. They don't like to have to pack all that stuff up, move it to another cell, and change everything around again. So learn new cellmates and those kind of things. So typically, the inmates are pretty peaceful about where they are, and they don't like to be moved. Right. And even if they may be 4 in there and there's an available cell where no one's in, a couple can move out to another one, a lot of times they just choose not to because they're just comfortable with where they're at. So.
What is the average stay time for an inmate in Cherokee County Detention Center?
That's a good question. I've never looked that up. It can literally be anything from a few minutes, from a booking process to make a phone call and somebody come pick you up, to we do misdemeanor confinement, where it could be a year or 18 months that they're in there. And then you have people like several people we have in there on murder charges that are awaiting trial for that, and because of delays and evidence and DNA and all these kind of things that's pertinent to their case, their bonds may be set to a place where they can't make their bond and get out. And so we've got several that's been in there for years, waiting trial. And so that's I've got my own opinion about that, but that's a court issue. That's not my issue. But they sometimes they're in there for years, so it could be anything from just a few minutes to years, and just depending on where you're in there for and what the situation is.
All right. Yeah. What has 2016 looked like at the sheriff's office? I know you have some numbers to share with us.
I pulled some things this morning just to kind of see where we're at, and these are soft numbers. This is not anything that's that we can say number for number it's accurate. It's just approximate numbers. But looks like this year, and we still got another probably 30, 40 hours to go before the year's over. Right. So, we're looking here at around 30,000 calls this year that the deputies have responded to. When we talk about these calls and we talk about the 30,000 calls, when you think about that breaks down to an average of about 2,500 calls a month, or about 83 calls a day is what the officers are going on. If you want to break that down even further, that's about 3.5 calls an hour, almost 4 calls an hour. And when you think about this and you think about, 4 calls an hour, that don't seem like a whole lot. There's not a whole lot going on. But you think about those 4 calls that come in an hour's time. Sometimes it takes multiple officers on some of those calls. If you got domestics or you got sexual assaults and you got all these violent type crimes that happen, breaking and enterings, sometimes it takes multiple officers to answer those calls. And then while they're on, say you have 3 officers on one call, there's 3 more calls coming in, and then by the time that one call may take them several hours to do, right? And by the time they get off that call, these other calls are stacking up and backing up, and so 4 calls an hour is quite a bit. And
if somebody responds and just spends 15 minutes trying to, that's not enough time. So you have to.
Right. And when you think about that, and you think about those calls that come in, you think about not only are you tying up a deputy responding to those calls or multiple deputies responding to those calls, but some of those calls are tying up investigators with investigating the crime and with maybe showing up on scene to do evidence collections and those type of things. And then not only do you have to worry about that, but this is the part of it that most people forget about. When you make an arrest or you charge somebody with a crime, while those 4 calls an hour are coming in, they still have to appear in court. They still have to testify. They still have to do grand juries. They still have to do sentence hearings. They still have to do probable cause hearings. And all these different type of things, not to mention the time at the jail that they spend going in front of a magistrate, swearing to probable cause, going through the paperwork process, writing reports, all those kind of things. So, when you think about 4 calls an hour, people say, well, you just go out there and knock that out and go home. But they're not thinking about all the hours of work that's attached to each one of those calls.
Right.
And so that we're looks like we're going to hit fairly close to, probably will not hit 30,000 this year, but we'll be in the 29.9 range somewhere for the year. And when you think about that also, as far as the sheriff's office, I looked up some other things that we do. We average around 3,000 civil processes a year. And so when you think about that, not only are the deputies responding to calls, but we're also having to serve subpoenas, we're having to serve court papers, we're having to serve all these type of civil processes, plus Sergeant Swanson that's over our civil process department. He handles all of our executions and courthouse short sales and all these different things that we have to take part in as far as being a part of the court process.
Right.
Of selling property, of auctioning property, and all those type of things. So we're also involved in that. And plus, I asked for some hard numbers this morning, but we hadn't got them yet. We should have them this evening. But we're looking at somewhere on the area of we've done about 500 concealed handgun permits this year. That's a little over one a day, almost 2 a day. And then on top of those 500 concealed permits, we've also done 600 purchase permits. And so that's 1,100 permits that we've done in the year from our administrative staff. And we have one lady does it full-time and one part-time that helps her. Mm-hmm. But out of that 1,100 purchase and conceal permits that we do, that involves background checks, DCI checks, fingerprinting, that involves interviews, that involves going to the courthouse and checking mental health records and all those type of things. There's a lot of legwork involved in that. And so when you think about all the things the sheriff's office does, a lot of these things that are time consuming, that takes up a lot of time to accomplish this, that people don't realize actually what the sheriff's office is doing in the background as far as the time they have to spend in personnel and all these kind of things to get things accomplished.
There's a lot of tedious paperwork that goes into making it all legal and just going through the day-to-day exercise.
And I think we talked about a couple of weeks ago about these purchase and conceal permits. With the state guidelines and the federal guidelines that's come down from the federal government, we're having to put a whole lot more time and a whole lot more work into these things. Several years ago, a person could show up at the sheriff's office, give $5 in their driver's license, get a background check done, and walk out there in 15, 20 minutes with the permit. But now with all the requirements and all the things that we have to do, it takes at least 2 weeks, and sometimes it takes several weeks to get all that stuff done and to get it back and submit the stuff to the state and get approval and do the mental health background checks and all those kind of things. And so a lot of people who hasn't gotten a permit in the last few years, may have got one 3 or 4 years ago, they're expecting to walk in and give $5 and walk out the permit in 15 minutes, and they don't understand that now it takes several weeks to get that accomplished.
Is that just to purchase a gun or to purchase or for a concealed?
Both.
Say if somebody wants to just go to a gun store and buy a gun, what do they have to do?
If they already have a concealed handgun permit, they can use that permit to purchase a gun on the spot. They don't have to go back and get a purchase permit. That is as long as they have a valid concealed permit. If they do not have a concealed permit, then they have to go to the sheriff's office and get a purchase permit, which means we have to go through that process of the background checks. We have to run criminal histories to make sure you're not convicted of certain felonies or certain assaults and things of that nature. We have to make sure that you're not wanted. You have to got a federal guideline criteria you have to meet. Also, you have to go back and check to make sure that you're not been adjudicated incompetent, or go back and check and make sure that you've not been in a mental facility somewhere. There's a lot of things that can disqualify you from that purchase permit. And so what we encourage people to do is, if you know that you buy guns from time to time, permits are valid for up to 5 years.
Okay.
So if you know that you buy guns from time to time, you may not be wanting to buy one right now, but you think you might want to buy one this year sometime or maybe next year, go ahead and come down and get permits, and you can get 5 or more permits at a time, and so you can come down and get multiple permits. And
what happens in the case where somebody, for example, Christmas, that we're buying a gun as a gift for someone else?
Right. They still have to have that purchase permit to buy the gun, even if they're buying it for someone else.
All right. What about the person that was receiving the gun? Do they have to have any kind of checks done?
There's, like I say, it gets very complicated in that, because if it is a gift from a family member or an heirloom or something like that, there's an exception for purchase permits. But if you're selling that gun to a neighbor or to a friend, then by the law, that friend is supposed to get a purchase permit and present that to you before you sell it to them. So a lot of times that doesn't happen, and we understand that doesn't happen. That's something that we're not real big on trying to investigate or trying to find out who's doing that. The only time we really get into that is if you're running a business, like if you're at a flea market or something and you're selling guns to the public. We may, look into that as far as, are you requiring purchase permits and things of that nature. But There are some exceptions to family and inheritance and those type of things. There's some exceptions to that, and every year it seems like it's getting more and more complicated. All this kind of started back a couple years ago when the anti-gun lobbyists tried to get a 10-day wait permit through the state, and it got denied. The legislation shot it down and wouldn't pass the bill to do a 10-day wait permit, and one of their compromises was to do the mental health background checks instead of doing the 10-day wait period. Well, the anti-gun people got exactly what they wanted and more by doing that, because now not only is it taking 10 days, but it's taking multiple weeks to get those back. So they kind of accomplished what they wanted to accomplish without the 10-day wait period. So that's where a lot of the complications in the law started coming in effect and started changing. There's been a lot of one law at a time kind of thing, and bills passed with this attached to it, and we could talk all day about legislation and how that works, but there's some. It seems like a little at a time, more and more things are going through legislation and going through and getting passed that puts requirements on the sheriff's office before we can issue those permits. And there's some things that the sheriff has no leeway on. That if you meet certain criteria, it's an automatic denial based on federal standards and on state standards, and they will not issue a concealed permit if these certain things are happening. So there's some things in the purchase process that the sheriff has discretion on, which doesn't make any sense to me. I would think the hard line would be on purchase and the discretion would be on concealed, but there's really not any discretion I have on concealed. It's just straight by the book, hard line, yes or no. But on the purchase permit, there is a leeway where the sheriff can have discretion on denial, and one of the things is based on good moral character.
Right. Now,
you tell me what's good moral character. So what's using an illustration for that is, if Tim comes down and wants to purchase a weapon, and he does a purchase permit application, and we do the background checks and everything's fine. He's not been arrested for anything. He has no history. He has no legal reason why he can't purchase a gun. But as sheriff, I know that my deputies have been out to Tim's house for the last month on parties and drug use, and
they won't leave me alone.
Drinking and and a lot of problems out there, and maybe neighbor disputes and a lot of different things. It gives the sheriff the leeway to go ahead and deny that purchase permit based on my personal knowledge and what I know about the situation.
And how often does that happen, that someone does get denied?
There's been not very often, but it does happen. A couple times a month, we probably get some denials. A lot of times the denials are based upon background checks. They're based on domestic violence charges. They're based on felonies in the past and things of that nature. I can only remember a couple times that I've denied on moral character, and it's been things that people that we know that we've had issues with and problems, and maybe they've had some mental issues or mental problems and might not have been to a doctor and been diagnosed with that. They may not have ever been involuntarily committed, but we know the person and we know what's happened. So there's been a couple of those that I've denied on. But for the people out there listening, even if you are denied, even if we deny you the purchase or deny you the conceal, you still have the right and still have the ability to file an appeal in Superior Court and have your case heard in front of a judge in the sheriff's office. Myself and my staff would have to explain to the judge why we denied it, and then the person would have to explain why they deserve it, and then the judge would make a decision on which way to go on that. So there's still an appeal process. It's just because we deny something doesn't mean it's finalized. You can still appeal that and go through the process. So there are avenues, that if you feel like you were slighted or wronged in any way, there are avenues that you can get relief on your end. So, that concealed process, like I said, just got extremely complicated. But in addition to those things, a lot of other things that people forget about the sheriff's office does is sex offender registrations. Not only do our deputies, Roger Williams is the one that kind of keeps track of our sex offenders in the county. He's the one that kind of keeps the files and kind of makes sure where everyone is and keeps those files up to date. However, there's still what we have to do at the sheriff's office called compliance checks. We still have to go and make sure they are where they say they are. So from time to time, ever so often, Roger himself and several of the investigators and deputies will spend a day of just going to all these different locations where the sex offenders are registered, knock on the door, and make sure they're still living there, make sure they are where they say they are. And not only while they're there, but they're also required to take a picture of the house and whatever vehicles they're driving to put into the file. And so that's time consuming. That takes up a lot of time to do that. And where Roger's very good about keeping track of those sex offenders and very good about keeping track of keeping those files up to date, but he does have to have help doing that. He's got other duties and other responsibilities.
Yeah,
so
people like Roger, he wears a lot of hats.
He wears a lot of hats, and so that's time consuming. It takes a lot of time to do that. We also have the victims advocate end of this, where Stephanie Swanson, who runs the victims advocate program, who she helps victims on various crimes, whether your house is broken into or you've been a victim of an assault or domestic violence situations. She works with these people and has a volunteer staff that helps her with that. Maybe going to court with people, sitting with them through court, helping them through the process, grief counseling, a lot of different things that goes through the victims advocate program. And so along with that, that's time consuming. I mean, as you can imagine, all these different things we're talking about, it takes a lot of time to accomplish all this. And so when we go back, and now we're fixing to go into 2017, we're fixing to go into a new budget. Some people out there in the county, they don't understand when we go back and we ask for things and ask for positions and ask for money to accomplish these things. Why we need the resources that we need, why we need the administrative staff, why we need all the people that we need at the sheriff's office. But there's just multiple things that we're doing there that we cannot accomplish if we don't have staff and have people to do that. So as things get busier and busier and more requirements come down and more things to do, that leaves us with no choice except to go back and ask for more personnel, ask for more help. So we're in a process right now of trying to, myself and the chief, about this time of year, after the first year, we will sit down and we'll start analyzing what we have at the sheriff's office, what we're going to need, what the future's going to hold, not just what we're going to need for this year, but what are we going to need 2 years from now? What are we going to need 3 years from now? And start putting things in place by requesting some of these things from the commissioners as to how that's going to help us get 3 years down the road that we need to be, so we're not overwhelmed when that happens. So we're constantly monitoring, keeping track of things. The calls for service, it's right about the same as it was in 2015. We may have come a little bit lower than we were in 2015, but not much. 2015 was the year the casino opened and all the, the influx of people and all of the issues there for the first several months of the drastic increase in calls for service and all that. That's kind of leveled off. That's kind of plateaued. In 2015, through the summer months, we were averaging about 3,000 calls a month. But it looks like in 2016, looks like that's dropped down to about 2,500 calls a month. So it looks like things have kind of plateaued out at about 2,500 calls a month. So that's kind of what we're looking at. But even at that, we're trying to monitor those things and see, okay, are we seeing increases certain times a year, certain days, certain times of day that we're seeing increases? So we're trying to adjust our deputies and adjust the sheriff's office in such a way that would accommodate those spikes and those ways. So we're constantly analyzing what we have, and we're constantly looking at this. Going, and then we switch over to the detention center side. Well, I looked this morning, and just a rough guess, we booked around 250 people, in 2016 that was confined to the jail. That's not counting people that came through that was arrested, that was released on no bonds or unsecured bonds and those type of things, or people that's made bond, that the bond may have been secured, but they made bond and got out and was never confined. So we averaged between 240 and 250 people that was confined in 2016. So, it's just very busy down there. That's almost a person a day that's getting actually locked up and behind bars. And so, when you think about that, you have to think about all the medical care and food that goes into that, and detention officers and even mattresses and and pillows and all those type of things that goes into all that.
The inmates that you book in the detention, are most of them first time offenders or repeat people that you've seen before?
I think that would be a good thing to break down and analyze, but a lot of the people that are in there are people that we've seen repeat offenders that are coming through. However, like I say, times are changing, and with the last couple of years, we're seeing more and more of people from out of state, people that we've never dealt with, from people that maybe doesn't live here, that's just passing through, kind of thing. And so every year we're kind of seeing more and more of those people that we've never had any dealings with whatsoever. When I started a little over 20 years ago in Cherokee County, when I was being trained and was out riding of a night and responding to calls, when the call would come over the radio, the training officer would generally say, well, I know this person, I know that family, we've dealt with them before, you know. You may want to just go ahead and start taking your stuff off because it's going to be a fight when we get there. They're going to be in the yard drunk, screaming, yelling, wanting to fight. You know, they kind of knew what to expect when they got there. But now when our deputies are responding, more often than not, they have no idea who they're responding to and what the situation is when they get there. And so that requires more training, that requires more in-service, that requires more specialty type training. And so those are things that we're trying to equip all of our deputies. We have to handle these unknown situations that they're going into.
And those are a little scarier than the other situations
They are.
when you have no clue what you're walking into.
They are. You know, and like I say, 20 years ago, you kind of, if you didn't know the person, you kind of knew the family, and you kind of knew their mom and dad or aunts and uncles, cousins, whatever. And so not only did you have the resource of dealing with that person before, but you knew the family.
Right.
And if you couldn't accomplish what you needed to with the person, you could talk to the family members and kind of get them to help you, you know, convince the person or do what you need to do without really needing to fight or lay hands on people. But now, like I say, more and more we're dealing with people who have no family in the area. They're not from here. They just moved here or just passing through, or it's a rental house or a rental cabin, you know. And so the deputies have no other resources to go to as far as family members. You know, they're having to deal with what's in front of them.
And you never know what kind of drugs that have altered their state of mind
Right.
and how that's going to be altered.
Right. And I will tell you this, you know, and I've really changed my thought process a lot in the last few years from when I started being a law enforcement officer. I've begun to realize, especially when I worked at the Drug Task Force and dealt with a lot of the drug issues and the families of these drug users, what I have found is the majority of the people that are locked up right now in Cherokee County Jail, the majority of those people are decent enough people when they're not on drugs and they're not drinking and they're not out of their mind.
Right.
A lot of these people, most of these people that's in the jail down there, if there wasn't around drugs, wasn't around alcohol, wasn't around bad influences, they're the nicest people you ever met. They're respectful. They're yes sir, no sir. You can take them out on work details and don't have to worry about them doing anything out there. You know, they do their job and are decent people. What I found out is that element of criminal, that element of they need to be locked up, they need to be out of society, they need to be locked away somewhere and not be out running around. Those are very few. There are very few people, percentage wise, that we have in Cherokee County. And a lot of people ask, what is that percent? I would dare say of the 30,000 people that we have in Cherokee County, I would dare say there's less than 5% that are menace to society that needs to be locked up. I would say easily 95% of the people out there are decent enough people. But what happens is through bad choices, through bad circumstances, through drug and alcohol use, sometimes they get themselves in positions they shouldn't be in or don't realize they're doing, and they find themselves locked up and they find themselves in jail. And one of the things the chief always, he tells the deputies this on about all of our deputies meetings and all of our detention meetings. I've heard the chief say it many times in the last couple of years. I've heard him tell the deputies, you know, you got to think about it when you're on a traffic stop or you're responding to the call. There's things we have to do. There's things that people are violent we have to deal with. But you always have to go back and ask yourself the question, what if that was your sister? What if that was your mother? What if that was your brother? What if that was your father? What if that was your cousin? You know. And so he's constantly trying to remind them, you know, that there's things we have to do.
Right.
But there's things that we can still be compassionate, and there's things that we need to realize that there may be good people that's made bad choices that come from good families. So we have to take that into consideration also when we're dealing with these things. And I think as long as we can keep that in the forethought of our mind, obviously if somebody's shooting at you, you've got to shoot back, you know. If somebody's assaulting you, you've got to subdue them and got to contain the situation. But I think a lot of times in law enforcement around the country, I think a lot of times people are quick to go to the taser. They're quick to go to hands-on. They're quick to go to their firearm. And so we need to realize that there's somebody's daughter, there's somebody's mother, there's somebody's brother, there's somebody's uncle, there's somebody's son. And so we need to remember that and take that into consideration when we're responding to stuff.
You have to be cautious and protect yourself, but at the same time,
right,
respect.
That's it.
They are people as well.
And that's what I found, like I say, with the detention center, that a lot of those people in there, even when they go in and do walkthroughs or talk to inmates that's in and out or whatever, 95% of them are respectful. 95% of them are decent enough when they're not on drugs and alcohol.
And some just have gotten mixed up with the wrong crowd.
Right. And that's exactly right. Personalities play into a lot of things. And as you're well aware, there are people out there that are leaders and there's people out there that are followers. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the people that's in jail are followers. And they get hooked up with someone else, and because someone else is doing the things, they just follow right along and do what they're doing until they find themselves locked up in jail. And that's an unfortunate situation.
All right. What great things do you see for 2017?
Well, one of the things that we're going to try for 2017 is that we're now gotten to a place where I think that we are gotten a good grip on the law enforcement end. We've gotten a good grip on getting our deputies on patrols the way they should, getting the staff the way it should be, of getting responding to calls, investigating calls. We're really in a good place, and I think that pays off when you talk to people in the public because you always run across certain people that's going to be negative no matter what. No matter what you're doing, they're going to be negative, and they're not going to like it, and you're doing something wrong. But the vast majority of the public we talk to are happy with the sheriff's office. They're happy with what they're seeing. They're happy with the cars they're seeing in their neighborhood and response times and all those. So I think we've got a pretty good grip on that. For 2017, what I would like to start into a phase of doing more community relations type things, of going in and doing more town hall kind of things, going in and doing more, getting more involved in the school systems and more involved in drug education and awareness and those type of things. And so we've got some plans for some more community related things for 2017. So from administrative staff, from myself and the chief and a lot of our administrative people, I'm anxious this year to get more away from the daily supervision of trying to be there for every call and everything that's happening, and be more out into the public and more out into doing those community relation type things. So that's kind of what we're shooting for 2017, is kind of more involved in the community, get the community more involved with this.
Trying to prevent criminal activity is much better than punishing for it happening. It
is. And, like I say, we house 150 people in the detention centers, or we can house up to that many. It wouldn't bother me a bit to see it down to having 40 or 50 people in there. Right. That's all that's in jail, and we don't want it to get down to 40 or 50 because we're not doing our job, or because that we're not arresting people or we're letting things go. But I would like to see it get down that low because we are doing preventative things, and because we're doing education and awareness and those types of stuff.
It would be a great reflection of our community.
It would,
just knowing that the population has dropped.
It would,
because of good choices.
Yeah. And so that's kind of what our goal is for 2017 is start into that phase. One other thing that we're trying to talking about community relations stuff is here in probably this month, or next month, probably in January, we are going to try to get together and start forming coalitions to look at this drug problem, to look at the things that's going on, and try to pull all of our resources together into one team. We have the Drug Free Coalition, and we have Job Corps at Tri-County, and we have mental health profession, and we have all these different things that are available in the county. But what I would like to try to accomplish in 2017 is pulling all these groups together and working together in one resource and one place, so that these people that are in need, they don't have to run to 15 or 20 different places to get help. They can go to one place and they can get the help wherever they need in that one place. So that's going to be my goal for 2017.
A lot of people don't realize all these things exist around them.
Oh, yeah.
So it would be great to have a one-stop that just connects them to all the places that they need to get help from.
And I think if we can get our local churches involved, and because we have churches that are doing a lot of community things already. We've got a lot of food pantries, we've got a lot of soup kitchens, we've got a lot of different outreach things that churches are doing. So I think if we can pull our churches together and pull all these resources in the county together to form a plan, And if we can find a central location and a place to pull all these resources together, then these people that are out addicted to drugs and seeking jobs and trying to get clean and trying to get the mental health and trying to get counseling and trying to get all these things where they know this is the place I need to go to. I can go to this one place and I can get all these resources and all these things I need.
Very good.
Yeah.
Well, we appreciate all that you do for our community, and I know we're a little over time again, but just a little bit.
Just a little
bit. But we appreciate your coming and spending your Fridays with us here on the radio, sharing with folks what's going on around the community, and just thanks for all that you do.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it, and I wish everybody a happy New Year. And if you don't have anywhere else to go, we'll see you at the Possum Drop.
All right, and we'll do this again, another show next year.
There you go. I'll see you next year.
I'll see you next year, Sheriff. It's WKRK Radio in Murphy, North Carolina, 11:40 our time. We hope you're having a great day.